Zekthar stood before the massive viewing screen in the command center of the Void Piercer. His scaled hands gripped the metal railing as he watched the star patterns shift past their ship. The Catherian Empire's greatest warship moved through space like a predator hunting its prey. Behind him, dozens of his officers worked at their stations, their reptilian faces focused on their tasks. The war room buzzed with quiet activity. Communications officers received updates from scout ships. Navigation specialists plotted their course toward the human colonies. Weapons officers ran final checks on their plasma cannons. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Zekthar turned away from the screen and faced his senior staff. His second-in-command, Sub-Admiral Kreshver, stepped forward with a datapad in his clawed hands. The younger officer's green scales gleamed under the artificial lights. "Commander, our intelligence reports are complete," Kreshver said, his voice carrying the typical Catherian growl. "The human species appears to be even more primitive than we first believed." Zekthar nodded and took the datapad. The information scrolled across the screen in neat rows. Population numbers, technological assessments, military capabilities, everything painted the same picture. The humans were weak. "Tell me what we know," Zekthar commanded. Kreshver straightened his posture. "The humans have been in space for less than 200 of their years. They have established colonies on 12 worlds, all within a small region of space. Their fastest ships can barely achieve 3 times light speed. Our vessels are 10 times faster." Another officer, Captain Vexmore, joined the conversation. His scarred face showed the marks of many battles. "Their weapons are particularly amusing, Commander. They still use projectile technology, metal bullets fired from chemical explosives. Some of their ships carry missiles with nuclear warheads." Zekthar almost laughed. Nuclear weapons. The Catherian Empire had moved beyond such crude technology 5 centuries ago. Their plasma cannons could melt through any known material. Their energy shields could deflect anything the humans might throw at them. "What about their military organization?" Zekthar asked. "Scattered and poorly coordinated," Vexmore replied. "Each human colony maintains its own defense force. They have no unified command structure, no central military authority. When we attack one colony, the others will not even know about it until we have already moved on to the next target." Zekthar walked to the tactical display in the center of the room. The holographic map showed the human colonies as small blue dots scattered across a relatively tiny area of space. The Catherian fleet appeared as red markers, vastly outnumbering the human forces. Fleet Admiral Vashketh believes this campaign will last no more than 2 standard cycles, Kreshver continued. "The humans will surrender after we demonstrate our superiority at their first major colony." This was how it always went. The Catherian Empire had conquered 17 different species over the past 3 centuries. The pattern never changed. They would arrive with overwhelming force, destroy a few military targets, and the alien species would surrender rather than face total annihilation. The last species they had encountered were the Meridians, peaceful traders who had built beautiful crystal cities on 7 different worlds. When the Catherian fleet appeared at their primary colony, the Meridians had sent a single message: "We surrender. Please spare our people." The entire campaign had lasted less than 1 day. Zekthar expected the humans to be even easier to defeat. The intelligence reports showed they were a divided species, constantly fighting among themselves. They had something called nations that competed for resources and territory. A species that could not unite against internal threats would certainly crumble when faced with external conquest. "Show me their defensive capabilities," Zekthar ordered. The tactical display shifted to show the human colony of New Boston. The planet appeared as a brown and green sphere surrounded by a small fleet of human vessels. Zekthar counted 30 ships, each one smaller than a Catherian escort vessel. "Their largest ship is approximately half the size of our destroyers," Vexmore explained. "They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light communication systems. Their tactics appear to be based on formation flying and coordinated attacks. Zekthar studied the human ships more carefully. They looked crude and primitive. Thick metal hulls covered in external equipment. Obvious exhaust ports that would be easy targets for Catherian weapons. The humans had built their ships like flying fortresses, sacrificing speed and maneuverability for heavy armor and large weapons. Their strategy seems to be based on absorbing damage and returning fire, Kreshver observed. They build their ships to take punishment rather than avoid it. This made sense to Zekthar. A primitive species would rely on brute force rather than advanced technology. The humans probably believed that bigger weapons and thicker armor would make up for their technological disadvantages. What about their ground forces? Zekthar asked. Even more primitive, Dexmore replied with obvious amusement. They still use chemical propellant weapons. Their soldiers wear metal armor and carry equipment that weighs them down. They have no energy weapons, no personal shields, no advanced communication systems. Zekthar nodded approvingly. The humans sounded like they were still fighting wars. From their pre-space age, the Catherian Empire had moved beyond such crude methods long ago. Their soldiers carried plasma rifles that could cut through any armor. Their battle suits provided complete environmental protection and enhanced physical capabilities. Intelligence suggests the humans have something called military traditions, Kreshver continued. They apparently follow ancient codes of conduct that limit their tactical options. They have rules about targeting civilian populations and treating prisoners of war. This was perfect. A species that limited its own military effectiveness with moral restrictions would be easy to defeat. The Catherian Empire had learned long ago that victory required the use of all available resources. They would do whatever was necessary to achieve their objectives. Prepare the fleet for our first engagement, Zekthar commanded. We will begin with New Boston. A swift demonstration of our capabilities should convince the other human colonies to surrender without resistance. The officers began implementing his orders. Communications went out to the 200 ships in the Catherian fleet. Weapon systems powered up. Navigation plotted the final approach to New Boston. Zekthar returned to the viewing screen and watched as their destination grew larger. The human colony world looked peaceful from space. Small cities dotted the continents, connected by transportation networks that glowed softly in the darkness. Orbital stations provided docking facilities for the small fleet of human vessels dotted. Almost seemed too easy. The humans had built their civilization in the open, with no attempt to hide or defend their most important installations. Their ships moved in predictable patterns, following established trade routes and communication schedules. They showed no signs of detecting the approaching Catherian fleet. "Commander," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." Zekthar turned toward the officer, put it on the main screen. The viewing screen flickered and showed the face of a human male. The creature had pale skin, short brown hair, and small dark eyes. It wore what appeared to be a military uniform, though the design seemed crude compared to Catherian battle dress. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Boston Defense Force." The human said, "We know who you are and why you're here. We've been tracking your fleet for the past 3 days." Zekthar felt a moment of surprise. The human detection systems were better than their intelligence reports had suggested. But it didn't matter. Knowing about the Catherian approach wouldn't help them defend against it. "We're willing to discuss terms," Morrison continued, "but we won't surrender without a fight. If you want this colony, you'll have to take it." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Zekthar studied the tactical display, noting how the human ships had moved into defensive positions around their colony. They were actually planning to resist. "Shall we begin the attack, Commander?" Kreshver asked. Zekthar nodded. The humans would learn soon enough that resistance was futile. The Catherian Empire had never been defeated in battle. Their superior technology and tactics had conquered every species they had encountered. The humans would be no different. "Begin the assault," Zekthar ordered. "Show them the price of defiance." The first shots of the battle lit up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. Zekthar watched from the command deck as his fleet's plasma cannons fired their opening volley. Bright green beams of energy lanced across the void, striking the human vessels with precise accuracy. 3 human ships exploded immediately. Their thick metal hulls offered no protection against the superheated plasma. The remaining human vessels scattered, breaking their tight formation as they tried to avoid the devastating Cytherian weapons. Direct hits on multiple targets, reported Weapons Officer Thexmore. The humans are taking heavy damage. Zekthar nodded with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. The human ships were too slow to dodge the plasma beams and too weak to survive direct hits. At this rate, the battle would be over in minutes, but then something strange happened. Instead of retreating to a safe distance, the human ships began moving closer to the Cytherian fleet. Their damaged vessels limped forward, trailing atmosphere and debris, but still firing their primitive weapons. "Commander," called out the tactical officer, "the humans are advancing toward our position. This makes no tactical sense." Zekthar studied the display screen. The human ships were indeed moving forward, even though several were clearly crippled. Their formation had completely broken down, but individual vessels continued to press the attack. "They're probably trying to get close enough for their short-range weapons to be effective," Kreshver suggested. "Their missiles need to get past our shields." Another volley of plasma fire struck the human fleet. 2 more ships exploded, their nuclear reactors going critical in brilliant flashes of light. But the remaining vessels kept coming, their crews apparently determined to fight to the death. On the tactical display, Zekthar could see 1 human ship moving directly toward the Void Piercer. The vessel was badly damaged, with hull breaches visible along its sides. Atmosphere was leaking from multiple points, creating a trail of frozen crystals in the vacuum of space. "Captain Morrison's ship is on an intercept course," reported the navigation officer. "Should we target it specifically?" Zekthar was about to give the order when something made him pause. The human ship was clearly doomed. Its weapons were offline. Its shields were down and its hull was cracked in several places. There was no possible way it could threaten the Void Piercer. "Let it come," Zekthar decided. "I want to see what the humans think they can accomplish." The damaged human vessel continued its approach, growing larger on the viewing screen. Zekthar could see the burn marks on its hull where plasma beams had struck. The ship was falling apart, but it kept moving forward with stubborn determination. "Commander," Lexmore called out urgently, "the human ship is not slowing down. It appears to be on a collision course." Zekthar felt a chill run down his spine. The human captain was planning to ram the Void Piercer. It was a suicide attack with no hope of success. The Cytherian flagship shields could easily deflect a damaged human vessel. "Maintain course," Zekthar ordered. "Their ship will be destroyed when it hits our shields." The human vessel struck the Void Piercer's energy barrier and exploded in a massive fireball. The shields held easily, absorbing the impact without any damage to the Cytherian ship. But then something unexpected happened. The explosion created a cascade of electrical feedback that overloaded the shield generators. Warning lights flashed across the command deck as the primary defensive systems went offline. The Void Piercer was suddenly vulnerable to attack. "Shields down!" shouted the engineering officer. "Multiple system failures across all defensive networks." Zekthar stared at the tactical display in shock. The human captain had somehow known exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. The suicide attack had been precisely calculated to exploit a weakness in Cytherian technology. "How is this possible?" Kreshver demanded. "The humans shouldn't know anything about our shield systems." Before anyone could answer, more human ships began their own suicide runs. Commander Lisa Hayes led a group of 5 vessels in a coordinated attack against the Cytherian cruiser Bone Crusher. The human ships moved in perfect formation, their damaged hulls glowing with the heat of atmospheric leaks. The Bone Crusher's plasma cannons fired desperately, trying to stop the approaching vessels. 2 human ships exploded under the barrage, but the remaining 3 continued their attack. They struck the Catherian cruiser simultaneously, their explosions combining to create a devastating blast that tore through the alien ship's hull. "The Bone Crusher is reporting critical damage," the communications officer announced. "They're losing power to all main systems." Zekthar watched in growing horror as more human vessels launched similar attacks. The aliens had expected the humans to fight defensively, trying to preserve their forces while inflicting maximum damage on the enemy. Instead, the humans were throwing away their lives with reckless abandon. Lieutenant Alex Turner commanded a small group of human fighters that had somehow gotten past the Catherian defensive perimeter. His tiny ships darted between the massive alien vessels, their projectile weapons hammering at weak points in the Catherian armor. "These human fighters are too small for our main guns to target effectively," Dexmore reported. "They're using their size advantage to avoid our weapons." The human fighters concentrated their fire on the Catherian weapons arrays, disabling plasma cannons with precisely aimed missiles. Turner's pilots seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. They had studied the Catherian ships and identified their most vulnerable points. Captain Nicole Foster led another group of human vessels in a flanking attack that caught the Catherian fleet completely off guard. Her ships had been hiding in the asteroid field surrounding New Boston, using the space rocks as cover while they waited for the perfect moment to strike. Foster's ships emerged from the asteroids like ghosts, their hulls camouflaged with reflective material that made them nearly invisible against the starfield. They struck the Catherian rearguard before the aliens even knew they were there. "Multiple ships reporting surprise attacks," the tactical officer called out. "The humans are using the asteroid field as a base of operations." Zekthar realized that the humans had been planning this battle for days. They had prepared defensive positions, studied Catherian tactics, and developed specific strategies to counter alien advantages. This was not the desperate last stand of a primitive species. This was a carefully orchestrated military operation. The human ships fought with a coordination that seemed impossible given their primitive communication systems. They moved in perfect harmony, supporting each other's attacks and covering each other's retreats. When one ship was damaged, two others would immediately move to protect it. "How are they coordinating so effectively?" Kreshver wondered aloud. "They don't have faster-than-light communication." Zekthar was beginning to understand that the intelligence reports had been completely wrong. The humans were not the disorganized primitives they had expected. They were intelligent, adaptable, and absolutely fearless in battle. Another human ship, commanded by Captain Bobby Thompson, managed to get close enough to the Void Piercer to launch a boarding attack. Thompson's Marines used magnetic clamps to attach their assault pods to the Catherian hull, then cut through the armor with plasma torches. "Intruders on Deck 7, announced the security officer. "The humans are attempting to board our ship." Zekthar sent a squad of Catherian soldiers to repel the boarders, but the humans proved to be more dangerous than expected. They moved through the ship's corridors with deadly efficiency. Using their smaller size to take advantage of cover and concealment, the human Marines carried weapons that seemed crude but were surprisingly effective. Their projectile rifles fired armor-piercing rounds that could penetrate Catherian battlesuits. Their explosives were designed to cause maximum damage in enclosed spaces. "The boarding party has been neutralized," the security officer reported after several tense minutes. "But they caused significant damage to our life support systems." The battle continued for hours, far longer than any engagement in Catherian military history. The humans refused to surrender, refused to retreat, and refused to accept defeat. They fought with a determination that bordered on insanity. When the last human ship finally exploded, the silence that followed was deafening. Zekthar looked at the tactical display and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. The battle was over, but the Catherian fleet had paid a terrible price. "Casualty report," Zekthar ordered quietly. Kreshver consulted his datapad with trembling claws. 27 ships destroyed or critically damaged, over 3,000 casualties. The humans fought until every single one of their vessels was destroyed. Zekthar stared at the debris field where the human fleet had made its final stand. No prisoners, no survivors, no surrenders. The humans had chosen death over defeat, and they had taken far too many Catherians with them. Prepare the fleet for the next engagement, Zekthar said finally, and send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we need reinforcements. 3 weeks after the battle at New Boston, the Catherian fleet approached Alpha Centauri. Zekthar stood in the command center, watching the human industrial system grow larger on the viewing screen. The repairs to his fleet were complete, but the memories of the previous battle still haunted him. The intelligence reports about Alpha Centauri painted a different picture than New Boston. This system was the heart of human manufacturing, with massive orbital stations and asteroid mining operations. The humans had been given time to prepare after news of the first battle reached them. What are we looking at? Zekthar asked his tactical officer. Captain Nexmore studied the long-range sensors. The humans have been busy, Commander. They've constructed defensive positions throughout the system. But these don't look like traditional military installations. Zekthar examined the tactical display. The human defenses were unlike anything he had seen before. Instead of building proper military bases, the humans had converted their civilian infrastructure into weapons platforms. Asteroid mining stations bristled with missile launchers. Cargo ships had been fitted with heavy armor and plasma cannons. Even passenger vessels had been turned into warships. They're using their entire industrial capacity for military purposes, observed Sub-Admiral Kreshver. Every civilian facility has been converted into a defensive position. This was disturbing news. The Catherian Empire maintained a clear separation between military and civilian infrastructure. Their conquests had always targeted military installations, while leaving civilian populations largely untouched. But the humans seemed to have no such distinction. Commander, called out the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. The main screen flickered to show a human male in military uniform. This one was older than Captain Morrison, with gray hair and tired eyes. His face bore the marks of someone who had been preparing for war. I'm Commander Derek Phillips of the Alpha Centauri Defense Force, the human said. We know what happened at New Boston. We know you're here to conquer our system, but we won't. Make it easy for you, Zekthar stepped forward. I am Commander Zekthar of the Catherian Empire. Surrender now, and your people will be treated according to our laws. Resist, and you will share the fate of New Boston. Phillips smiled, but there was no humor in his expression. We've had 3 weeks to prepare for your arrival. We've learned from New Boston. You're about to discover what humans can accomplish when we have time to think. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Zekthar studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the human defensive installations. There were hundreds of them, scattered throughout the system in no apparent pattern. Begin the attack, Zekthar ordered. Target their largest installations first. The Catherian fleet moved into the system, their plasma cannons charging for the opening assault. But as they approached the first human installation, something unexpected happened. The massive orbital station suddenly began moving. Commander, reported the navigation officer, the human station is mobile. It's not a fixed installation. Zekthar watched in amazement as the orbital station rotated and began accelerating toward the Catherian fleet. The structure was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest human warship. But it was moving like a spacecraft, its engines pushing it through space with surprising speed. That's not a station, Dexmore realized. It's a converted cargo hauler. They've attached engines and weapons to a civilian freight vessel. The massive ship opened fire with dozens of missile launchers. The projectiles streaked across space, forcing the Catherian fleet to scatter, but these weren't ordinary missiles. They exploded in complex patterns, creating clouds of metallic debris that interfered with Catherian sensors. Our targeting systems are being disrupted, reported the weapons officer. The human missiles are releasing some kind of chaff that's blocking our sensors. More human vessels emerged from hiding places throughout the system. These were clearly civilian ships that had been converted for military use. Passenger liners bristled with weapons. Cargo vessels had been armored and armed. Even small personal craft had been fitted with missile launchers. Commander Phillips led a flotilla of converted passenger ships in a coordinated attack against the Catherian advance guard. His vessels moved in perfect formation, their civilian origins disguised by military modifications. The humans had turned their entire merchant fleet into a navy. "They're using civilian vessels as warships," Kreshver observed. "This violates every principle of civilized warfare." Zekthar was beginning to understand that the humans didn't follow the same rules as other species. They were willing to sacrifice anything and everything to defend their territory. Civilian ships, commercial installations, even passenger vessels had been turned into weapons of war. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Catherian military experience. The humans didn't fight from fixed positions. Instead, they used their converted civilian vessels to conduct hit-and-run attacks throughout the system. They would strike at the Catherian fleet, then disappear into the asteroid fields before the aliens could respond. Captain Rachel Murphy led a group of converted mining vessels in a complex maneuver that caught the Catherian fleet completely off guard. Her ships used their industrial equipment as weapons, firing streams of superheated plasma normally used for asteroid processing. "Those aren't military weapons," Dexmore reported with amazement. "They're using mining equipment to attack our ships." The human mining vessels moved through the asteroid field with perfect precision, using their knowledge of the local terrain to outmaneuver the Catherian fleet. They had spent years working in this system, and they knew every rock and hiding place. Zekthar watched as the human miners led a squadron of Catherian cruisers into a carefully prepared trap. The asteroids around them suddenly exploded in a chain reaction, creating a massive debris field that trapped the alien vessels. "They've turned the entire asteroid field into a weapon," the tactical officer reported. "The humans have placed charges throughout the mining area." The trapped Catherian ships found themselves surrounded by a cloud of high-velocity debris. The humans had calculated the explosion perfectly, creating a killing field that made escape impossible. They picked off the trapped vessels one by one, using their superior knowledge of the local environment. "How did they coordinate this?" Kreshver demanded. "The timing was perfect across dozens of different locations." Zekthar was beginning to realize that the humans possessed capabilities that their intelligence reports had never mentioned. They could coordinate complex operations across vast distances without faster-than-light communication. They seemed to anticipate Catherian tactics and prepare counters in advance. The siege of Alpha Centauri stretched on for months. The humans refused to engage in direct battles, instead using guerrilla tactics that slowly wore down the Catherian fleet. They would strike from unexpected directions, inflict casualties, then disappear before the aliens could respond. Commander Steve Rodriguez coordinated a series of attacks that demonstrated the true scope of human adaptation. His teams had studied, captured Catherian equipment, and learned to mimic their energy signatures. They used this knowledge to approach alien vessels undetected, then strike at point-blank range. "The humans are using our own technology against us," Lexmore reported after yet another surprise attack. "They've learned to disguise their ships as debris or disabled vessels." The humans had also developed new weapons specifically designed to counter Catherian technology. They created electromagnetic pulse devices that could disrupt alien electronics. They built adaptive armor that could redistribute the energy from plasma weapons. They even developed boarding techniques that took advantage of their smaller size and superior agility. "They're learning from every engagement," Zekthar realized. "Each battle teaches them something new about our capabilities." The most disturbing aspect of the human defense was their willingness to sacrifice their own infrastructure. They would deliberately destroy their own installations to deny them to the Catherian forces. They turned their own cities into weapons, rigging them with explosives that would detonate if the aliens tried to occupy them. "They're destroying their own civilization to prevent us from capturing it," Kreshver observed with horror. What kind of species does this? Zekthar had no answer. The humans were fighting by rules that no civilized species would accept. They were willing to sacrifice everything they had built rather than submit to conquest. It was a level of fanaticism that the Catherian Empire had never encountered. The final phase of the battle came when the humans launched a coordinated assault on the Catherian supply convoy. Captain Tony Miller led a strike force of converted civilian vessels in a daring raid that penetrated deep into Catherian-controlled space. Miller's ships moved like ghosts through the convoy, using stealth technology adapted from civilian communication. Satellites. They struck at the most vulnerable targets, destroying fuel tankers and ammunition ships before disappearing back into the void. Our supply lines are completely compromised, reported the logistics officer. The humans have cut off our access to reinforcements and supplies. Zekthar stared at the tactical display, watching as his fleet's situation grew. The emergency meeting in Fleet Command changed everything. Zekthar stood in the holographic conference room, his image projected alongside the other senior commanders of the Catherian Empire. The faces around the table showed confusion and growing concern as the reports from human space continued to arrive. Fleet. Admiral Veshketh's massive form dominated the center of the table. His ancient scales had dulled with age, but his eyes still burned with the fire of a career soldier. Behind him, the tactical displays showed the current state of the war with disturbing clarity. Explain to me how a primitive species has managed to destroy 43 of our vessels, Vashketh growled. Your initial report suggested this would be a simple conquest. Zekthar felt the weight of failure pressing down on him. Admiral, our intelligence was incomplete. The humans fight using methods we have never encountered. They do not follow any recognized patterns of warfare. Commander Nexidal, leader of the Third Fleet, leaned forward. What do you mean by different methods? Are they using some unknown technology? No, Zekthar replied. Their technology is still primitive, but they use it in ways that make no logical sense. They sacrifice their own forces to achieve tactical advantages. They convert civilian infrastructure into military assets. They fight as if defeat is literally impossible. The holographic display shifted to show recordings from recent battles. The other commanders watched in silence as human ships conducted suicide attacks against Catherian vessels. They saw civilian cargo haulers attacking military cruisers. They witnessed the destruction of human cities to deny them to alien forces. This is madness, whispered Commander Kethril of the Second Fleet. No rational species would fight this way. Zekthar nodded grimly. That is exactly the problem. We have been fighting them as if they were rational. But human behavior follows different rules entirely. The breaking point had come 3 days earlier at the Catherian supply depot on Kepler 442b. The base was supposed to be impregnable, protected by overlapping defensive systems and a full garrison of elite troops. But the humans had found a way to attack it anyway. The assault had been led by Colonel Amy Peterson, a human female who commanded a mixed force of regular military and converted civilian vessels. Her approach to the battle had defied every principle of accepted military doctrine. Instead of concentrating her forces for a single decisive strike, Peterson had divided her fleet into 7 separate groups. Each group attacked a different section of the base simultaneously, spreading the Catherian defenses too thin to be effective. Show them the tactical analysis, Zekthar requested. The hologram displayed Peterson's attack pattern. The human forces had struck at the communications center, the power generation facility, the weapons storage depot, the command center, the landing bays, the shield generators, and the garrison barracks all at the same time. This should have been impossible, Fleet Admiral Vashketh observed. Dividing forces weakens the attack at each point. That's what we thought, Zekthar agreed. But the humans weren't trying to overwhelm any single target. They were trying to create chaos and confusion throughout the entire base. The human attack had succeeded beyond all expectations. By striking multiple targets simultaneously, Peterson had prevented the Catherian defenders from coordinating their response. Each section of the base had been forced to fight independently. Without support from other areas, the humans had also employed psychological warfare tactics that left the Cytherian garrison demoralized and confused. They broadcast strange human music during the battle, used their own casualties as improvised explosives, and demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice entire units to achieve minor tactical objectives. The human commander transmitted a message. During the battle, Zekthar continued, she said that every Cytherian soldier killed was worth the sacrifice of 10 human lives. She meant it literally. Commander Nexitl shook his head in disbelief. No military leader would accept such casualty rates. It's completely irrational. The humans don't think like us, Zekthar explained. They view warfare as a contest of will rather than a contest of capability. They believe that determination and sacrifice can overcome any technological advantage. The most disturbing part of the battle had been the infiltration team led by Captain Tony Miller. His reconnaissance specialists had spent weeks studying the Cytherian base, learning to mimic alien behavior patterns and communication protocols. Miller's team had used captured Cytherian equipment to disguise themselves as alien soldiers. They had walked openly through the base for 3 days, gathering intelligence and planting explosives. When the main attack began, they struck from within the base itself. They turned our own security systems against us, Zekthar reported. The humans learned our access codes, our patrol schedules, even our meal times. They knew the base better than some of our own soldiers. The infiltration had been possible because the humans possessed an ability that the Cytherians had never encountered before. They could observe and adapt to alien behavior with frightening speed. What should have taken months of study, they accomplished in days. Show them the communication intercepts, Zekthar requested. The hologram displayed recordings of human military communications during the battle. The tactical discussions revealed a level of coordination and strategic thinking that rivaled the Cytherian Military Academy's most advanced simulations. Colonel Peterson had coordinated her 7-pronged attack using nothing more than prearranged signals and timing. Her commanders had operated independently, making tactical decisions based on general objectives rather than specific orders. They don't need constant communication to maintain coordination, Zekthar explained. Each human commander understands the overall strategy and adapts their tactics accordingly. It's like fighting an enemy with 7 minds working as one. The battle had lasted 3 days before the Cytherian base finally fell. But the humans had paid a terrible price for their victory. Over 60% of Peterson's forces had been killed or wounded in the assault. Any rational species would have withdrawn after suffering such losses, Fleet Admiral Vashketh observed. Why did they continue fighting? Because they weren't fighting for the base, Zekthar realized. They were fighting to prove that Cytherian positions could be taken. They wanted to send a message to their own people that the aliens were not invincible. The implications of this realization were deeply disturbing. The humans were conducting a propaganda war alongside their military campaign. Every battle, even those they lost, served to strengthen their people's resolve and weaken Cytherian morale. We found something else in the base computers, Zekthar continued. The humans had been recording everything. Every tactical maneuver, every weapon signature, every communication protocol. They were studying us. The captured data showed that human intelligence services had been analyzing Cytherian military doctrine for months. They had identified weaknesses in alien tactics and developed specific countermeasures for each type of Cytherian vessel. They're treating every engagement as a learning experience, Commander Kethril observed. They're using our own battles against us to improve their capabilities. The most chilling discovery had been a series of human tactical manuals that had been developed during the war. These documents showed that the humans were systematically studying Cytherian psychology, looking for ways to exploit alien mental patterns. They know how we think, Zekthar said quietly. They understand our tactical preferences, our command structure, even our personal motivations. They're using this knowledge to predict our moves and counter them. The humans had developed profiles of individual Cytherian commanders, analyzing their past battles to identify behavioral patterns. They knew which commanders preferred direct assault, which ones favored defensive tactics, and which ones were likely to retreat under pressure. "This is impossible," Fleet Admiral Vashketh declared. "No species could learn so much so quickly." "The humans have something we don't understand," Zekthar replied. "They call it adaptability. It allows them to change their tactics based on new information. Every failure teaches them something that makes them more effective in the next battle." The conference fell silent as the full implications of this revelation sank in. The Cytherian Empire had always won through superior technology and rigid military doctrine, but the humans were turning those advantages into weaknesses by learning to predict and counter them. "What do you recommend?" Vashketh asked finally. Cathar looked around the table at his fellow commanders. "We need to completely rethink our approach to this war. The humans are not just another species to be conquered. They are something entirely new. They are an enemy that becomes more dangerous every time we fight them." The holographic conference ended with no clear resolution, but Zekthar knew that everything had changed. The war with humanity was no longer a simple conquest. It had become a test of survival itself. The final battle began at Volf 359, where the Cytherian Empire had established its main staging area for the human war. Zekthar stood on the bridge of the Void Piercer, watching the approaching human fleet with a mixture of dread and fascination. In 6 months of fighting, the humans had transformed from desperate defenders into something far more dangerous. General Patricia Young commanded the human counteroffensive from her flagship, the Defiance. The vessel was clearly human in design, but it had been modified with captured Cytherian technology. Energy shields flickered around its hull, and plasma cannons had been mounted alongside the traditional projectile weapons. "They've been busy," observed Sub-Admiral Kreshver, studying the tactical display. "The human fleet is twice the size it was at Alpha Centauri." Zekthar nodded grimly. The humans had done the impossible. While fighting a defensive war against superior alien forces, they had somehow managed to expand their military capabilities. New ships appeared in their fleet every week, built in hidden shipyards throughout human space. "How many vessels are we facing?" Zekthar asked. 347 ships, reported the tactical officer. "But, Commander, these aren't the same crude vessels we encountered at New Boston." "The humans have been upgrading their technology." The approaching human fleet looked nothing like the primitive force that had defended the first colony. These ships moved with deadly precision, their formations constantly shifting in complex patterns that made them difficult to target. They had learned to fight like a single organism with hundreds of parts. "General Young is transmitting," announced the communications officer. The main screen showed the face of an older human female. Her gray hair was pulled back in a military style, and her eyes held the confidence of someone who had studied her. "Enemy extensively." When she spoke, her voice carried no trace of fear or uncertainty. "Commander Zekthar," Young said, recognizing him somehow. "We've been watching your career with great interest. Your tactical preferences, your response patterns, your psychological profile. We know you better than you know yourself." Zekthar felt a chill run down his spine. The humans had been studying him personally, analyzing his command decisions and behavioral patterns. They were fighting a war of information as much as a war of weapons. "You have lost this war," Young continued. "Your empire sent you to conquer a primitive species, but instead you've awakened something that will change the galaxy forever. Today, we show you what humanity has become." The transmission ended and the human fleet began its attack. But this wasn't the chaotic assault of desperate defenders that Zekthar had witnessed before. This was a carefully orchestrated military operation that demonstrated just how much the humans had learned. Captain Bobby Thompson led the first wave of human vessels in a complex maneuver that split the Cytherian formation. His ships moved in perfect synchronization despite the vast distances involved, their timing so precise that they seemed to share a single mind. How are they coordinating so effectively? Kreshver demanded. They still don't have faster-than-light communication. Zikthar was beginning to understand. The humans had developed a distributed command structure that didn't rely on constant communication. Each ship commander understood the overall strategy and could adapt their tactics based on local conditions while maintaining strategic coherence. They're not following orders, Zikthar realized. They're following principles. Each captain knows what needs to be accomplished and figures out how to do it independently. This was completely different from Catherian military doctrine, which relied on centralized command and rigid adherence to predetermined tactics. The human approach was more flexible, more adaptable, and far more difficult to predict or counter. Commander Helen Davis coordinated a series of boarding actions that showcased the evolution of human warfare. Her Marines used modified civilian equipment to breach Catherian hulls, then move through the alien ships with deadly efficiency. The human boarding teams had studied Catherian ship designs extensively. They knew the location of every critical system, every defensive position, every escape route. They moved through alien vessels like they had built them themselves. The humans are inside the bone crusher, reported the security officer. They've taken control of the engineering section and are working their way toward the bridge. Zikthar watched the tactical display as more human boarding teams infiltrated Catherian vessels throughout the fleet. The aliens had superior individual strength and better personal weapons, but the humans fought with a coordination that made them nearly unstoppable. The human Marines worked in perfect teams, covering each other's movements and supporting each other's attacks. When one team member was wounded, the others immediately adapted their tactics to compensate. They fought like a single organism with multiple parts. Send reinforcements to all compromised vessels, Zikthar ordered. But he knew it was already too late. The humans had turned boarding actions into a precise military science. The space battle continued with increasing intensity. Admiral Kevin Foster, commanding the human flagship Defiance, coordinated a fleet-wide maneuver that surrounded the entire Catherian force. The humans had learned to use their apparent disadvantages as strengths. Their ships were smaller and more maneuverable than Catherian vessels. Their weapons had shorter range but higher rate of fire. Their crews were more fragile but also more adaptable. The humans had turned every weakness into a tactical advantage. We're completely surrounded, reported the navigation officer. The human fleet has us encircled. Zikthar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had somehow maneuvered their entire fleet into position without the Catherians noticing. It was a level of tactical sophistication that rivaled the greatest military minds in galactic history. The human attack came from all directions simultaneously. Foster's ships struck with weapons that seemed impossible for their technology level to produce. They had somehow learned to manufacture Catherian-style plasma cannons and had modified them to be even more effective. They're using our own technology. Against us? Vixmore reported with amazement. But they've improved it somehow. The humans had done more than just copy Catherian weapons. They had studied the alien technology, understood its principles, and then enhanced it with their own innovations. The result was hybrid technology that combined the best of both species. Captain Sandra Lee led a squadron of human fighters that demonstrated the full extent of human adaptation. Her pilots used tactics that seemed to violate the laws of physics, performing maneuvers that should have been impossible for their vessels. How are they moving like that? Kreshver demanded. Their ships don't have the power for such acceleration. Zikthar realized that the humans had modified their fighters with Catherian propulsion systems. But they had done more than just install alien engines. They had integrated the technology so completely that their ships performed better than either. Human or Catherian vessels alone, the battle reached its climax when the human boarding teams reached the bridges of multiple Catherian vessels simultaneously. The aliens found themselves fighting for control of their own ships while under attack from the human fleet. The Star Render has been taken, reported the communications officer. The humans have seized control of the ship's weapons and are turning them against us. More Catherian vessels fell to boarding teams or surrendered to avoid capture. The human tactics were so effective that resistance seemed futile. They had learned to fight a three-dimensional war that combined space combat, boarding actions, and psychological warfare. "Commander," Kreshver said quietly, "we need to consider surrender." Zekthar looked around the bridge at his officers. They were the elite of the Catherian military, veterans of countless campaigns. But the defeat in their eyes told him everything he needed to know. "Open a channel to General Young," Zekthar ordered. The human commander appeared on the screen, her expression showing no triumph or satisfaction. She looked like a professional soldier who had completed a difficult but necessary task. "We're prepared to discuss terms," Zekthar said. Young nodded. "The Catherian Empire will withdraw all forces from human space immediately. You will recognize human sovereignty over our territory and agree to a non-aggression pact. In return, we will allow your fleet to leave unmolested." "And if we refuse?" Zekthar asked. Young's expression didn't change. "Then we will destroy every ship in your fleet and hunt down every Catherian vessel in the galaxy. We have learned to fight your kind of war, Commander. But we can also fight other kinds of wars that you have never imagined." Zekthar realized that the humans were offering mercy, but they were also demonstrating their capability to show none. They had evolved beyond desperate defenders into something far more dangerous. "I accept your terms," Zekthar said, as the Catherian fleet prepared to withdraw. Zekthar reflected on what the war had taught him. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something entirely new in the galaxy. They were a force that adapted and evolved with every challenge. The chilling reality was that fighting humans didn't just risk military defeat, it risked facing an enemy that learned from every engagement and became more dangerous each time. The Catherian Empire had awakened something that would change the balance.